Good morning. My name is Cam Scales, and my pronouns are she and her. On behalf of the Unitarian Universalist congregation, we welcome you to church this morning. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Native tribes. Whether you have joined us online or are here in our sanctuary, we're very glad to have you with us in this sacred time we choose to be together. We are an open community of learning, caring, and justice-making. You are welcome here, every part of you, just the way you are. Our congregation is served by our minister, the Reverend Jamie Dingus. She is available by contacting the office for pastoral care and to answer any questions about Unitarian Universalism. If you're a newcomer, please sign our guest book in the foyer, back in the back, to receive our weekly email newsletter. Please take a moment right now to silence your electronic devices. If you have a joy, sorrow, or important milestone you would like shared during our Circle of Candles and included in the pastoral prayer, please write it on one of the white cards like this in the pew in front of you and place it in the offering basket. For community news and events, check our email newsletter, website, and the paper insert in your order of service this morning. After our service, everyone is welcome to join us in the fellowship hall over here for coffee and snacks. Now I would like to invite Dave Reese to ring the singing bowl to help us enter into the service more deeply. And finally, having gathered in a shared quest for truth, meaning, and purpose, let us light our chalice with these words, adapted from Sherry Woodbury. To all who are yearning for community, come in, be among us. To all who are just getting started, to all who long to go deeper, to all with tender places needing care, come in. Be among us. To the ones who have healed and have care yet to give, for those who are curious and hungry to learn, for those who know that they have something to teach, come in, be among us. To the young and the old, the innocent and the jaded, the fresh of mind and the deeply steeped, there is room here for each and every one. Come in, be among us. And now, let us enter into the service more deeply with music for centering, followed by our thread song, which can be found in your order of service.
For our call to worship, I will be reading number 429 in the hymnal. Come into this place of peace, and let its silence heal your spirits. Come into this place of memory, and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power, and let its vision change your heart.
I'm Lori Larson, your music director, and I'd like to invite you to stand in body or spirit and sing with me our opening hymn. This is number 37 in your gray hymnal, God Who Fills the Universe. I believe this will be unfamiliar to most of us, but it's worth our while to get to know this one. The message of this hymn is a very simple prayer. The melody is a Transylvanian hymn. I'm going somewhere with this. It's written in the 1500s by a man who was a preacher in the court of the only Unitarian king in history. Ha! I can share more information about that. If you're interested, see me next door after the service. This is a beautiful hymn tune in a minor key. I know some folks think that minor keys are sad and melancholy. No, I kind of find the rich harmonies turn me a little more introspective. So I hope you feel that way when you sing this. Ron's going to play it all the way through for us once because, as I said, it's unfamiliar. And then we will sing this beautiful hymn prayer together. Number 37.
God who fills the universe, from the atom to the stars, make firm my changeful heart, so I may do my part and bring joy to all the earth. God who webs the universe with amazing mysteries, make glad my fragile soul, so I can see life whole and bring hope to all on earth. God who keeps the universe by the truths of living love, make strong that love in me, so I can set it free and bring peace to all on earth. Thank you for your lovely singing. We're going to sing our doxology next, as is our tradition here, and we will follow it with our words of aspiration. Both of these are on your blue sheet, and when we get to the words, we will turn and face and say these words to one another. Let's sing our doxology. From all who dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land, by every tongue. De todos bajo el gran sol, sura esperanza, fe, amor, verdad y belleza cantando, de cada tierra, cada voz. May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament, and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to help one another in fellowship, that is our aspiration. You may be seated. And it's time to invite everyone who wants to hear the story up close and personal to come on down and hear Kristen read. Come on down.
Good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Kristen. My pronouns are she and her, and I am the Director of Religious Education here at UUCH. And I have a very exciting story to share with you, but it doesn't have any pictures. I'm sorry. But let's be honest, I am terrible at holding the book so anyone can see the pictures anyway, so really it's all the same. All right. Who likes mud? Me too. And jumping in mud puddles, especially this past week, I hope everyone has been jumping in the mud puddles as long as their parents tell them it's okay. I don't want to get in trouble. Okay. All right. So this story is called Muddy Children, and it's by Janine Groschmeyer, from our book, the UU book, From a Lamp in Every Corner. Over 200 years ago, in a small house in a small town, on the edge of a forest of a very big trees in the state of New Hampshire, there lived a small boy. His name was Hosea Ballou. Hosea, just like other children, liked to learn and do new things. He was always asking questions about why and how and what. And just like other children, Hosea liked to play. He liked to play hide and seek with his 9 older brothers and sisters. In the winter, he liked to jump into snowdrifts. In summer, he liked to jump into the creek. In fall, he would jump into leaf piles. And in the spring, spring was Hosea's favorite season of all, because in the spring it rained and rained and rained, and then Hosea could jump into the mud. Hosea, just like other children who loved mud, liked it when it was soft and squishy. He liked it when it was thick and sticky. And if it didn't quite rain enough, that was no problem. He would just carry water to the dirt and make his own mud puddles all on his own. He liked to poke sticks into the puddles and see how deep the mud was. And he liked to make mud pies and build mud dams. He liked to jump in the puddles hard with both feet and make the big muddy water splash really high so that the mud splattered all over his brothers and sisters' clothes. And he loved to step in puddles very slowly so that the mud oozed up just a little bit at a time between his toes. Yes, Hosea loved mud. Now, you can imagine that not everybody in his family liked mud quite as much as Hosea did. His mother had died when he was only 2, so his older sisters took care of him. His sister, who did laundry and scrubbed the family's dirty clothes in big wash tubs, didn't like having to scrub all that mud off of Hosea's clothes, or anyone else's clothes for that matter. His other older sister, who kept the little children clean, didn't like having to scrub all the mud off of Hosea. And Hosea, just like other children, did not like baths, especially when it meant he had to stand in a wash tub in front of the fire and have water dumped over his head. But his sisters loved him, so they took him home and washed him and dried him and made him clean. Then Hosea's sisters went to their father and said, "Father, please tell Hosea, stop playing in the mud." "Hosea," said his father very sternly, "you should not play in the mud." "Why?" asked Hosea, because remember, he liked asking lots and lots of questions. Because, said his father, the preacher of a Baptist church that his family went to, just as we try to live a good life, to be kind to other people and follow God's plan, we try to stay clean. Yes, Father, Hosea said, and after that day, he did indeed try to stay clean. But it wasn't easy. He stopped stomping in the mud puddles on purpose and splashing muddy water everywhere. He stopped making enormous mud pies. But sometimes the mud was just there. He had to walk through the mud to get across the yard to gather eggs from the chickens. He had to walk through mud to feed the pigs. And I mean, sometimes when he was already a little muddy from doing his chores, he played in the mud just a little bit and got even muddier. His sisters, who loved him, took him home, washed him up, dried him off, and made him all clean. And then they went again to their father and said, Father, please tell Hosea to stop playing in the mud. Hosea, his father said even more sternly, you must not play in the mud. Yes, Father, Hosea said. But he was sad because he had really tried to not get muddy, most of the time anyway. Are you very angry with me, Father? I'm disappointed in you, Hosea, and I'm a little angry with you. Hosea hung his head, kicked the dirt with his toes, and then dared to look up just a little. Do you still love me? Hosea, said his father, and he didn't sound quite so stern anymore. I will always love you, Hosea, no matter what you do. Even if I get muddy again? Yes. Even if I get really, 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 really muddy? Yes. Even if I get mud all the way up to my eyebrows, in between my fingers and toes and all in my hair? Even then, his father said with a smile. And then he added, but remember, Hosea, you must try to stay clean. I'll remember and I'll try, Hosea promised. And he did. He stayed clean most of the time. But also he kind of, he started growing up and didn't really like mud quite so much. But he still loved asking questions. Father, Hosea asked when he was a teenager, how can it be our church believes that God will let only 1 in 1,000 people into heaven, even if many of those 1,000 people lead good lives? His father didn't have an answer for that question. Father, Hosea asked, if I had the power to create a living creature, and if I knew that the creature would have a miserable life, would suffer and die, and then go to hell and be miserable forever, and I went ahead and created it anyway, would that be a good thing or a bad thing? And would I be good or bad? And his father didn't have an answer for that question either. So Hosea had to go find his own answers. He read the Bible and about the different stories with religious people and about God. And he went to some Universalist churches and he asked more questions there. And at the age of 19, Hosea decided he believed in universal salvation, which is the idea that everyone, everywhere, and everyone in the universe will be given salvation. Eventually, everyone will be saved from hell. And not only did Hosea believe that God would let more than 1,000 people into heaven, Hosea believed God would eventually let everyone into heaven, good and bad. How can you believe that? Asked his father. How can you believe that God would let bad people into heaven? Because, Father, I remember what you told me when I was small. I believe that even if God is disappointed with people and maybe even a little bit angry with them, God will always love them and want them to be happy no matter what they do. And no matter how muddy they are. And that is the end, and we will sing our children off to their classes.
We are the Unitarian Universalist Church of Huntsville, a proudly inclusive spiritual community. Together, we build a broader search for meaning, a bolder form of compassion, and a braver voice for justice. If you would like to support us with a monetary donation, we would be very grateful. Your generosity helps us to keep the utilities on, maintain our building and grounds, run our various ministries, pay our staff a fair wage, and support organizations that share our UU values. You may donate online using the QR code in your order of service, or you may put cash or check donations in the offering baskets. Completed Circle of Candles cards, these cards, should be placed in the offering baskets at this time also. You are invited to come forward during this time and quietly drop a stone into the bowl of water here next to the ramp, in honor or in memory of what you hold in your heart. It is through your generosity that we continue to serve our mission here at UUCH. With gratitude, we now receive the offering. kindly join me now for a few moments of prayer and reflection? Spirit of life, source of compassion and connection, join with us as we enter into this time of prayer and intention. Hold us as we hold in love these joys and sorrows shared here in our community. We offer continued prayers and thoughts of concern for families and loved ones of those injured or killed by the violent acts in Pennsylvania a little over a week ago. And we offer prayers for our leaders who are striving to do what they deem best for all people in our nation and the world. May they continue to strive with strength and integrity to effect change for the better for all humans on our fragile planet. And now we share the prayers of our community. The first is from Carolyn, and I'm sorry I cannot read the last name. She needs food as she's been in the hospital. Please talk to us after the service. The next is from Teresa and Tim Miller. Teresa's oldest sister, Rosemary, or Romy, is in the hospital. She went in with slurred speech and has had a mini stroke. She has 90% blockage of the carotid artery. Prayers and healing wishes are requested for her. We certainly do wish her speedy healing. Let us be moved to compassion for all that has been shared into this beloved community and for all that will remain silent and unspoken in our hearts. And let us say, blessed be and amen. And now please join in the singing of our responsive music, number 1009, Meditation on Breathing.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
I suggested reading number 704 in the hymnal because it's consistent with my ministry of traveling the country speaking on universalism. Go out into the highways and byways. Give the people something of your new vision. You may possess a small light, but uncover it. Let it shine. Use it in order to bring more light and understanding to the hearts and minds of men and women. Give them not hell, but hope and courage. Preach the kindness and everlasting love of God.
Weary raise my heart to thee. I trace the rainbow through the rain and feel the promise is not vain, that morn shall till us be.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure for me to be with you today. My name is Kalen Freestead. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. Perhaps I don't know what was in your newsletters or that sort of thing, so perhaps you already know a lot about me. But I'll just mention a few things. I'm a United Methodist minister from Iowa, and I wrote a book on universalism, travel around the country speaking on universalism. And that began in 2003. That's when I got my book into print, and we've been traveling around at least half-time ever since. We were full-time for 3 years, from 2003 to 2006, living in our travel trailer. My wife, Darlene, is here with me. And anyway, I've spoken at a lot of UU churches. It all started in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And that was wonderful. Felicia Urbanski was the minister there, and she was gracious enough to invite me. I really didn't know anything about UU churches up to that point. But I've learned a lot since then, because I've spoken at more than 260 UU churches across the country over the last 21 years. So it's just been a high privilege for me to speak I've spoken at a lot of different denominations, but I especially enjoy speaking at UU churches. The diversity and the respect for diversity and appreciation of each other, celebrating the power of love, and so on. And so it's been wonderful to speak at all churches, but especially I found it's very, very enjoyable and fulfilling to speak at UU churches. I want to commend your minister, Jamie. She did something very unusual, and that is I called her. What I do, I determine where I want to go for a speaking tour, and then I start calling UU churches. I sometimes speak at other churches too, but I called, and Jamie answered the phone, and we talked for a few minutes, and she invited me to speak right on the spot. That's pretty unusual. That's pretty courageous to do that. A total stranger from Iowa, of all things. Call her up, and she had just invited me. Now, that has happened before, but maybe only a couple times before, so she is unusually courageous in inviting this total stranger. But see, I found also that in other churches, they typically are more hesitant to invite strangers to speak, because they're afraid I'm going to say something controversial, then I'll leave, and they have to clean up the mess. But UUs can handle controversy pretty well, I've discovered. But anyway, it's a real pleasure for me to be with you today. When I served the United Methodist Church in Dallas Center, Iowa, I became acquainted with the UU minister in Des Moines. And when she realized that I believed in universalism, she invited me to attend a special service that their church is going to be having. It's going to be in the small town of Mitchellville, which is a few miles east of Des Moines. And it was going to be in a church building that originally housed a Universalist congregation. So I was happy to accept her invitation. Let me just say this. They had the tradition of having one service there at that Universalist church each summer as a way of celebrating their Universalist heritage. So I was happy to accept her invitation to join them for that service. And I'll always remember, as I walked up the walk in front of that church, over the door it read, Universalist Church. And I thought, I have arrived at home. So universalism has been really important to me for a long time. And that's why I wrote a book on the subject and travel around speaking about universalism. Today I'm going to be speaking on the history and the significance of the teaching of universalism. It is sometimes referred to as universal salvation. So I'd like to offer a definition of salvation that you perhaps haven't heard from other sources. You're probably aware that at least in conservative Christian churches, their definition of salvation would be to accept Jesus as your personal Savior so you can go to heaven when you die. Well, apparently that definition works really well for a lot of people, but to me it's not very adequate because it doesn't necessarily involve any change or growth. And so I came up with a definition of salvation that works for me, and that is salvation is to learn and grow either with or without divine influence so as to experience fullness of life in this life and beyond. So if you I see at least one, at least, okay. And if you don't believe in the divine, or if you don't believe in life after death, then you can just leave those parts off the definition. And so to me, the most basic understanding of salvation is to learn and grow so as to experience fullness of life. So in contrast to what a lot of people believe, I reject the idea that a lot of people are going to spend eternity suffering in hell. Instead, I believe that everyone will eventually experience salvation or fullness of life. And for certain individuals, if that doesn't take place in this lifetime, I believe it will take place sometime beyond. During the time of Jesus, it was very commonly taught in the religions of the day that the vast majority of people were going to spend eternity suffering in hell. But there were a couple of exceptions to that. One was the Zoroastrians. Perhaps you're familiar with the Zoroastrian faith. It developed in the area of Persia, which is, of course, where the current country of Iran is. That was developed in the 5th and the 6th centuries before the time of Jesus, and they were universalists. Isn't that wonderful? They believed in universalism. So the idea of universalism is not something new. It goes back at least 2,500 years and probably a lot longer than that. So those Zoroastrians, they were wonderful, progressive people. Another person who differed with the idea that a lot of people were going to spend eternity suffering in hell was Jesus. It's really obvious to me from many passages in the Bible that Jesus did not believe in eternal damnation, but believed that everyone would eventually experience salvation or fullness of life. In the environment, though, where the conventional thinking was that the majority would go to, would spend eternity suffering in hell, it was sometimes difficult to convince them otherwise. But there were a lot. So let me say this. What that means to me is that they weren't fully converted to Christianity, because Jesus clearly taught universalism, it seems to me. And so there were some who weren't fully converted, but there were a lot who were fully converted, and that is, a couple examples of that would be Clement and Origen of Alexandria, prominent leaders and theologians during the time of the early church. Others included Gregory of Nyssa, Ambrose, Bishop of Milan, and many, many others as well. But as I said, there were some people who weren't fully converted. Tertullian was one example of that. And he became a Christian at age 40, and he continued to hold on to the idea that many people would suffer forever in hell, even though others would be saved. And in fact, he so relished the idea of other people, of course it's other people, not himself, he so relished the idea of many other people suffering in hell that he said he believed that one of the most superb thing. Boy, now I lost my memory of what I usually remember how to do this. But anyway, he said one of the best things about heaven would be the superb view of the damned frying in hell. Now, doesn't the thought of that just make you feel good all over? Isn't that astonishing? A person who professed to be a follower of Jesus, a follower of the one who taught so much about love and peace and forgiveness and compassion, could so relish the idea of a lot of people suffering excruciating torment in hell forever. The theologian Augustine was another example of a person who wasn't fully converted to Christianity. He became a Christian at age 32 and held on to the belief of endless suffering of many people beyond death. But Augustine was a pretty decent theologian in many respects, and so it's not surprising that his theology started to become dominant in the church. Augustine lived in the latter part of the 4th century and into the 5th century. So it's not surprising that by the 6th century there was coming to be quite a controversy over the issue of universalism. A lot of people, and probably the vast majority, believed in universalism among those early Christians, but other people didn't like that. And so there was quite a controversy over it. And in order to resolve this controversy, the Roman Emperor Justinian called a church meeting. It was the 5th Ecumenical Council in the year 553. Now, does it seem a little strange to you that a Roman emperor would call a church meeting? Well, it makes perfect sense when you think about the fact that emperors like to control people. Isn't that a given? Emperors like to control people, and they had learned that threatening people with eternal damnation was a foolproof means of controlling them. The problem is they weren't able to control those free-spirited universalists. They could threaten them with unending hell all they wanted, and they didn't take it seriously. So the emperor allied himself with the hellraisers of the day, the people who advocated the teaching that a lot of people would suffer forever in hell. And together they pushed through a resolution which abolished the teaching of universalism. It's not surprising that with all the power of the church as well as the state against the teaching of universalism, it pretty well died out after that, or went dormant or underground. But you can't suppress the truth indefinitely, right? Eventually it'll start bubbling up someplace. And that's what happened about 300 years ago. It really started more than 300 years ago, but about 300 years ago it started to become more of a dominant movement and more of a common belief after that time. John Wesley, who was the primary organizer and leader of the Methodist movement in 18th century England, had a close association with a group of Christians called the Moravians. Now, the Moravians believed in universal salvation. Isn't that wonderful? So that's another fine group to be sure. But Wesley in those early years disagreed with them. He argued strenuously with them over the issue of universalism because he thought they were so wrong. Well, he continued his lifelong association with the Moravians, and it seems that they eventually wore him down, because John Wesley eventually came to believe in universalism late in his life. Now, I love to tell United Methodists that John Wesley eventually came to believe in universalism, and that is because in the United Methodist Church, the most conservative people are the ones who are most likely to reject the teaching of universalism. At the same time, they can often be heard to say, let's go back and reestablish the teachings of John Wesley. I thought, yeah, let's do that. After all, he did come to believe in universalism later in his life. The American colonies proved to be a particularly fertile ground for the spread of the teaching of universalism. George de Benneville came over from France in 1741. He was a physician, and he did quite a lot to spread the teaching of universalism in eastern Pennsylvania and in New Jersey and in Maryland. John Murray came over from England in 1770, and he worked closely with the Quakers and the Baptists in spreading the teaching of universalism throughout the American colonies. It was under Murray's leadership that the Universalist Church in America was organized. There were many prominent women leaders in this modern version of the Universalist Church, one of them being Olympia Brown, who was ordained in the Universalist Church in 1863. Now, I'm United Methodist, and we started ordaining women in 1956. In fact, I knew one of the women that was ordained in that original group, the first group, Nancy Nichols, her name, a wonderful lady. But anyway, We started ordaining women in 1956, and considering that there's still churches today that don't ordain women, I felt pretty good about that. That is, I felt pretty good about it until I realized that the Universalists beat us by almost 100 years when they ordained Olympia Brown in 1863. Hosea Ballou was the most prominent leader and theologian during his life and ministry. And when he died in 1852, there was the Universalist Church had about 800,000 members. So it was a strong movement, to be sure. But the teaching of Universalism hasn't been espoused only by Universalists or Unitarians for that matter, but has been espoused by theologians and leaders of other denominations as well. For example, there was in the 19th century, there was a German theologian named Friedrich Schleiermacher. I wonder, how many people here have heard of old Friedrich? Okay, well, that I see 2 or 3 or 4 hands. That puts you at perhaps slightly above average. Because Friedrich Schleiermacher obviously is not a very well-known theologian, but he was a fine theologian and a strong advocate of universalism. And besides that, I just like to say his name, Friedrich Schleiermacher. I love that name. Then in the 20th century, there were other theologians who taught universalism. There was Karl Barth and Paul Tillich, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Leslie Weatherhead, and many others as well. So the teaching of universalism has a long, rich history. For more than 500 years, think about that, it's a long time. For more than 500 years following the time of Jesus, and then especially again for the last 300 years as well. So you might wonder, why is this such an important issue for me as a United Methodist minister? Unfortunately, the teaching of universalism is not a part of our doctrine in the United Methodist Church. But I'm working to try to change that, and I think we're making some progress. But anyway, so why is this so important to me? Well, it seems to me that the teaching of a God of eternal damnation has prevailed in most churches and in our society at large for far too long and with devastating consequences. One of the reasons this is so important is because the teaching of a God of eternal damnation turns many people away from God. People know that they would never, ever do such a thing themselves. They would never torture their children extensively, and certainly not forever. I mean, that is literally an insane concept, right? So we know what happens when people torture their own children. They either end up in prison or a mental hospital. Yet they say that's what God will do for eternity. Throw these naughty people into hell and torture them forever. I mean, literally an insane concept. And so the teaching of a God of eternal damnation turns many people away from God. Sometimes they become atheists. Now, I need to acknowledge that I've learned a lot about atheism from UUs. And I'm grateful. When we went on the road 21 years ago, I knew a little bit about atheism, but I didn't know much. I thought atheists surely had to be sad people. But how wrong I was. One of the high points of speaking in UU churches is that I've met a lot of wonderful atheists. I didn't expect that, but I did, and so that's been a high point. And so I've found there are a lot of wonderful atheists, but there's a lot of wonderful people of a great variety of faiths in UU churches. And for some of them, they find atheism to be a thoughtful, responsible, mature way to approach life, and it works for them. For people for whom atheism works, I really don't have a difficulty with that. But in other denominations, when people become atheists, it often is not so positive. And that is, they sometimes still have in the back of their mind the possibility of spending eternity in hell. And if there's no God to rescue them from that plight, they sometimes conclude that they are doomed, and that can lead to despair and meaninglessness. We all want to make the world a better place. And that's what motivates me more than anything else to travel the country speaking on universalism. We all want to make the world a better place, but we're not likely to accomplish very much in that regard as long as the teaching of a God of eternal damnation continues to prevail in most churches and in society at large. And that is because what people believe about God has a powerful and direct influence on how they live their lives. So if people believe that God is judgmental and condemning and cruel, then it's very, very easy to justify living that same way themselves. It's like the old song, One Tin Soldier goes, "Go ahead and hate your neighbor. Go ahead and cheat a friend. Do it in the name of heaven. You can justify it in the end." Sadly, I see people in our own country and around the world seeking to justify evil behavior in the name of heaven, in the name of God. And it's much easier to do that if we believe that God is judgmental and condemning and cruel. On the other hand, if we believe that God is loving and kind and merciful and gracious and patient, then we are more likely to reflect those values in our lives. This is of enormous significance. I believe if we're going to change the world for the better, perhaps the most important single thing that we need to do is to change people's perception of God. There's a man named Robert Short who wrote a book called Something to Believe In. And one of the things he says in that book that's worth noting is that he says that people tend to resemble the gods they serve. I think that's profound. People tend to resemble the gods they serve. It's very difficult to raise people's behavior above their perception of God. And so what we need to do is to raise our behavior above the idea that God is condemning and cruel to that of loving. Abraham Lincoln was, during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln was sometimes criticized because he loved his enemies too much. He was told, "You shouldn't love your enemies, you should seek to destroy them." To which Lincoln replied, "Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends?" Isn't that powerful? Do I not destroy my enemies when I make them my friends? Abraham Lincoln was a Universalist. He rejected the teaching of a God of eternal damnation. He believed in the power of love and the preciousness of each individual. And because of that, he could love even his enemies. And what a difference that made in how he lived his life. It seems to me that we who believe in universalism, who believe in the power of love and the preciousness of each individual, are called to rise above being judgmental and cruel in order to be able to transform the world through love. So we who believe in universalism have really an important message to share with the world, and it's important that we do so. Again, Robert Short, in his book, Something to Believe In, says, "There is too much at stake for us to allow ourselves to be intimidated by the wrathful self-righteousness of the hell-raising gloomy doomies." Isn't that a mouthful? There is too much at stake for us to allow ourselves to be intimidated by the wrathful self-righteousness of the hell-raising gloomy doomies. Then he goes on to say, "Therefore, our witness to them should be just as aggressive and unambiguous as theirs has been to us." Fundamentalists can be intimidating. They go around quoting the Bible and asking people whether or not they're saved. So they can be intimidating. But I say, let's not be intimidated. After all, we're the ones with the good news. They, in contrast, spread a teaching that is divisive and leads to cruel and inhumane behavior and justifies abuse. With their understanding of things, it's really no big deal to torture people, whether at Guantanamo Bay or wherever. After all, they contend that God is going to torture people forever, and if it's okay for God to torture people, surely it must be okay for us to do it. Besides, the torture that we may inflict upon others, whether it's waterboarding or whatever, is nothing compared to the torture that they say that God will inflict upon naughty people forever in a literal lake of fire, no less. So we who believe in universalism, who believe in the power of love and the preciousness of each individual, have a wonderful message to share with the world. So it's really important that we not be intimidated. The teaching of a God of eternal damnation leads to wars and racism and oppression and abuse, while the spread of the teaching of universalism leads to equality, respect, love, and dignity for all. So I say, let's not be intimidated. Instead, let us freely and boldly proclaim to the world the wonderful message of universalism, and the world will be infinitely better off because of it. Amen.
Let us rise now and join together. Rise in body or in spirit as the Spirit moves you, and sing our closing hymn, 131 in your gray hymnal, Love Will Guide Us. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road, agreed to giving, love will guide us through the hot night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way. On the road from greed to giving, love will guide us through the hot night.
Let us now take a moment to extinguish our chalice with these words adapted from Emily Richards. Our work has just begun, the work of holding one another and this community in love, the work of trusting that we are on the right path, the work of believing that which connects us is stronger than that which separates us, the work of engaging in that which makes us whole, the work of deeper understanding and commitment, the work of letting go of that which does not serve us, the work of radical inclusion, the work of collective liberation, the work of this beloved community, a beloved community of which we are all a part, a place where we are welcomed, respected, valued, cherished, a place where we belong.
For our closing words, I'm reading from number 692 in the hymnal. If here you have found freedom, take it with you into the world. If you have found comfort, go and share it with others. If you have dreamed dreams, help one another that they may become true. If you have known love, give some back to a bruised and hurting world. Go in peace. Now let us sing our rite of community, 1039 in the teal hymnal, Be Thou With Us.
Be thou with us now and always, now and always. Blessed be.
Blessed be and amen.